in Vietnam, I went with a group of people from the U.S. and other countries to investigate the repression against the peace movement in Saigon. That's the name of the place during that time. And I decided that I would go with the group. We went there and we studied the repression. Some of the Buddhist monks were setting themselves afire as a way of protesting and dramatizing the atrocities that were happening there. Some of the Vietnamese students, I mean the South Vietnamese students, have been persecuted. They've been put in tiger cages. They had been, the process of punishment was to have them, force them to drink lots of water, and then they'd turn them upside down and hang them by their heels, and then they would drown from the water that was in their body coming down through their nose. There are those who had galvanized nails driven in their fingers, and we can see the prints from that. So they've been persecuted, and you know, because of their stand against the war in Vietnam. So as we gathered this information, we became closer to them. On the last day before we left, they asked us to join them in a protest march at the U.S. Embassy. And among our group, we had those who had draft cards, and they were going to turn them in, and they were going to turn in their dog tags. And these were veterans from the U.S. who were against the war in Vietnam. There was a large organization of them as well. So we discussed it, even though we were there mainly for research and information gathering. We said that, okay, we'll join you to go into the U.S. Embassy. And we did. Well, we got tear gassed by the South Vietnamese troops, and they, we were able to climb over a wall to try to escape the tear gas. Once we got across the wall, we were in the grounds of the university. And when we were there, we noticed that the troops had come around and were still confronting us, and they you know, drawn weapons, and that a fire had broken out in one of the buildings, you know, in the distance there, and we didn't know what was happening, those of us who were Americans. Well, we discovered that there were crates of Coca-Cola bottles, and they were actually Molotov cocktails. And the Vietnamese students were throwing these Molotov cocktails at the armed troops. And I thought for sure, as I did on other occasions, that this would be the end for me. And I said to myself, I will not be the first one to die in Vietnam, you know. Maybe for a different reason, but, you know, this is it. Because they were advancing towards us with drawn weapons. And I thought that if one of those Molotov cocktails hit, you know, one of those soldiers and they went up in flames, they would just open fire. So I said, what can I do? Well, because of my nonviolence training, I said, okay, all of us join hands. Join hands. I said, and then those who were throwing the Molotov, I said, this is not peaceful. And their idea of nonviolent resistance was they would have a nonviolent march, but then they would resist by throwing bricks and bottles and Molotov cocktails. But I was trying, there was no time to have a workshop on nonviolence, so I couldn't explain to them that that was, you know, inconsistent. The troops, to see that we had nothing in our hands, that our hands were, you know, tied to each other, okay? It also would stop them from throwing Molotov cocktails because they couldn't throw if their hands were, you know, locked together. And then I say advance. Now we did have some verbal confrontation because the Vietnamese told me, say, in Vietnam, Vietnamese decide. I say, when I'm in Vietnam, I'm going to decide with you, okay? Because I have something at stake here too. So hold hands. So I had to take charge. Okay, I've had to do that in other movements. Okay, so I don't mind. I said, listen, follow my directions. Join hands. When they joined hands, there was clouds of tear gas was still, in the air and that kind of thing. I said, okay, advance, march forward. So here we are with arms linked together, marching forward, so that the troops would see that we were not being chased by them, okay, nor were we using violence. So nonviolence means that you don't run from a situation, okay, nor do you have to use violence, but you can use the force of your soul against the violence itself. And by joining hands together, we felt a sense of unity, and you feel a sense of power. That's why those of us in the nonviolent movement, you many times see us join hands and sing together and march together, because we can feel the warmth of each other's body. See, okay? And as we walked forward, that moment of truth came, and we paused, and they also stopped. They had the drawn bayonets, and there was a moment of no movement, but there was something that was moving, and because our whole goal was to strike the conscience of them. And if they want to shoot unarmed people, okay, then we had no choice. But we had to present ourselves, and we were prepared to suffer if necessary, but not to cause any pain or suffering on others. So they backed away.